Good evening, everyone. My name is Rudy Page, and welcome to Make Carnival Safe. And this is going to be a community wellness dialogues. It's going to be a great, interesting evening. We've got great guests, and it's going to be interesting indeed. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask Ansel Wong to open the session. Thank you, Ansel.
Hi, everyone. My role is very simple, to try to set the context for the reasons why we got involved in this opportunity to talk to all of you around issues, because whether we like it or not, there is a great expectation in Carnival coming back onto the streets. And the way things are going at the moment is every expectation that we will have Carnival in the summer. Whether in London, whether in Leeds, or whether it's in Nottingham or wherever. So that is the expectation. And I think as we prepare for that carnival, we need to face some of the challenges, some of the risks, and some of the concerns that I think we need to face as masqueraders, as band leaders, as members of the audience, and just concerned people. And I hope that this opportunity is for us to look at some of those issues, because I don't think Carnival as an event is immune from what I say has happened in the past, which is COVID-19, Brexit, and COP26. Because increasingly we have been asked as Carnival leaders and Carnival band people to justify what we are putting on and what we are performing as a result of those issues. So this summer is going to be exciting. And I think one of the major risks that we may have looking to Carnival is around safety, well-being for our community and for everybody. And I really want to be opportunity to discuss what it is that we need to do, what it is that we need to be aware of, and what it is that we need to plan so that the experiences of everybody, the public, the participants, are enjoyable. Okay. We have a number of trusted messengers who could help lead us, but I think we'll be looking for each and every one of you to contribute. It's not a lecture, and we're not doing that. It's a dialogue, as Rudy said, and that dialogue involves participation by everybody. I had outlined a number of issues, some of which we're not going to be able to deal with all at one go. But the first and overriding one is the issues around the risk of transmission and infection from COVID and any of its variants that may occur prior to the start of Carnival. Then there are issues around how do we manage and make it safe for everybody to participate? Children, young people, people with disabilities and vulnerabilities. What are the kind of practical consideration? And how do we ensure that they are free of risks as a result of the parade or as a result of any of the functions like Panorama or so on? So the heightened celebrations that we will see may well lead to some of the risks, which I identify as people drinking, consumption of alcohol, and then not being in full control. And we've seen instances in the past where lorries had gone over people's feet because of things like that. So there are safety considerations there, as well as well-being and health. So we can't explore all of them, but we will attempt to look at some of the key issues. And I think Rudy will just bring us back to that kind of central concern.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Ansel. And actually, related to that, there's a couple of points that I also want to put out to our group for consideration. The first one being is what provisions or adaptation will be made to allow disabled persons or those with limited mobility to attend the carnival as either a spectator or masquerader. Then also, what provisions are being made to assure absolutely anyone that has not paid to be part of the masquerade are kept out of the band. There is zero safeguarding for masqueraders, and this seriously increases the risk of sexual assault and violence. So we'll add those couple of points for those of you who have experience in this area. So we'd welcome your expertise around that. Right, so for the next few minutes, we're going to look at this whole community wellness as it relates to the work that some of us have been doing in and around the NHS system. And we talk about the trusted messenger model, and that's those of us who are working in the NHS or any of the related agencies, the CCGs or public health. And it's a wide range of people who are clinicians, they're academics, they're GPs, and they're senior biblical leaders as well, and community leaders. And our position is to ensure that our community is informed, reassured, so that they can make the choice. And these trusted messengers are from our community. When our community, I mean our population group, that's both African and Caribbean population group. And there's a term that we use, is that the workforce is the community and the community is the workforce. And today I think we can say Carnival is the community and the community is Carnival, which is really important. So our first speaker this evening will be Dr. Donald Palmer, Associate Professor of Immunology, and he will talk to us around understanding our immune system. Thank you, Donald.
Well, thank you, Rudy. And, thank you everyone for giving the opportunity to speak to you today. Immunity is, over the last, couple of years, is an increasingly popular word. If you put immunity or immunology in Google, you get quite a lot of information, and it's a really complex area. And so I'm just really going to touch on a few things, and I want it to be related to Carnival and how can we, better protect ourselves. And I'm really looking forward to Carnival. I often go. So in terms of my background, as Rudy mentioned, I'm an associate professor of immunology. I've got a PhD, a doctorate in immunology at Imperial College. And I've been researching in the immune system for well over 30 years. I've got over 50 publications. I've written several book chapters, etc. And in fact, my area of research, and I'm going to touch on this, is really about what the impact of age on the immune system. So as we get older, our immune system gets weaker. And so what can we do to maintain a functional and healthy immune system? So that's really important. And I'll touch on a bit about that. So, I mean, let's look at it this way. We know that what causes illness are very much what we call microorganisms, germs. And so once they get inside our body, we need a protective mechanism, and that's our immune system. And so the way to think about it is that it's what we call the root of infection. So how does germs, what's the root of which they get inside our body? And what is it about our immune system that provides protection? So there's generally three ways which a germ or a microbe can get inside your body. One is if it cuts the skin. So the skin is a very important barrier, but if it cuts the skin, microbes can get in there. Another important way microbes can get in is ingesting contaminated food. That's food poisoning. And the third way, which is probably the most popular way, is what we call through the sort of airways, through air droplets, through what we call the nasal system. Classically like flu or COVID. So when we think about roots of infection, we need to, that's one of the reasons why the idea of wearing masks and being socially distanced was something that was considered and being used very early on in the pandemic. Naturally, this won't be the case with Carnival because everybody will be close together. So, and I know my dear friend Jennifer Pearson may comment on that, because once you're close together, there's a possibility of diseases being transmitted, and that's as something to consider. But overall, what's really important about your immune system is that there are many players that are involved, and what they will do is they will provide protection for the individual. But there's a real problem in how you make this immune response. It varies considerably, and this has really been the problem. So, for example, what's really important around immune fitness, what you need to consider is that there are various factors that can impact the health of our immune system. Nutrition and diet is one. So it's important to have a regular diet, have vitamins, for example. Vitamin D is something that's highlighted to be quite important. Sleep is equally important to make sure you've got a really good sleep, because again, that's really important to have a healthy and robust immune system. Stress. So again, when we're thinking about carnival and thinking about, make sure that we are in a helpful and less stressful environment. Because what happens with stress lowers your immune system. Okay, age is also one. So think about age. So older folks may need to be careful in terms of, their immune fitness, and equally we know exercise. But the two I just want to sort of mention to folks is general health and general well-being. We know those two have a major factor. So when we talk about comorbidities, we got to think of things like, diabetes, high blood pressure, etc., which all have an impact on our immune system. And given that some of these diseases are prevalent in our community, this is something we need to think about. So it's, in terms of our immune system, we've got a really robust immune system. There's many different layers, but their impact on how well they'll fight diseases is based on the number of factors which I've just mentioned, and we can discuss that more. But I'll stop there so that others can continue in the conversation. And thanks again.
Thank you for that, Donald. Now I'd like to bring Jennifer Pearson in, regional lead Midlands CNO, and also a member of the BME Strategic Advisory Group. Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Rudy. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for asking me to join this really important discussion. So I am a lead nurse in the health service. I've worked in the health service for many, many years, and recently have worked in intensive care. I've been asked to talk about transmission. This is going to be a mass gathering. I too, like Donald has said, I'm looking forward to Carnival. I love Carnival, but I would and will be anxious about a lot of people together, because when we're close together, diseases will be transmitted. And so what I just quickly want to say to you is how these diseases are transmitted. And primarily, these diseases are transmitted by person to person, direct human contact, spread through tiny, tiny particles, what we call aerosols, droplets. Spread by human contact, you're going to be very, very close together. Some people may be disinhibited. So that's something to really seriously think about. So if somebody's coughing around you, somebody's sneezing or talking, all of that is a risk with respect to transmission, community transmission. And this virus and other illnesses are highly transmissible. This virus is highly transmissible, and the outcomes mean that you risk infection, hospitalization, and I'm sure you know there's a lot worse. So seriously think about the guidelines that we have currently that will end on Thursday. Think seriously about making sure you have sanitizer with you, hand gels. You're seriously thinking about who you're standing next to, and think about just controlling that spread. Think seriously about space. you can wear a mask if you want to. It isn't legal, we know that, but you can wear a mask. And for those of you that are more vulnerable with underlying conditions, think seriously about those sorts of things, hand washing, using your gel regularly. And we don't know who has travelled recently, and we don't know which countries have got high incidences of this virus. So we've got to seriously think about who's going to be next to us, that dense amount of people that's going to be in and around us. That's all I want to say.
Okay.
This virus is dangerous still, so seriously think about the spread and avoid the exposure.
Thank you very much for that, Jennifer. I'd now like to call Michaeline Holder March, and that's around the infection control in mass gatherings. Michaeline.
Hi everyone. Yes, like everyone, I am a true masquerader. I love carnival. But I think it's really important for us to just get back to basics, and what the two previous panelists says is very important. I think we need to start about what we know. And so I'll introduce a little bit about myself. I'm an antimicrobial global ambassador. I work for public health as a senior clinical quality lead, IPC advisor. And through my company, I just picked up a role as a director for IPC. And I work all over the world. Rotimi and I do share ambassadorship for the global network for antimicrobial and antimicrobial stewardship. So we know for a fact that COVID, we regurgitating COVID all the time, and people are probably sick of hearing about it. But the fact is, we know that COVID-19 factually has lasting illness and impact on our well-being, from cardiovascular, respiratory, every aspect of your body you can think about. So if you had COVID, some of you might have recovered very quickly and don't have long-lasting illnesses, but some start to have complications. So that is what we know factually. The other thing is that in a mass gathering, this is what I'm talking about, is about setting the guidance for personal risk assessment. And I know that Jennifer brought up some of the key things, especially you'll meet a lot of people from different countries. But it's about recognizing the emotional and physical challenges. And I know that you all talk about mobility, but it's really important also about your emotional and mental health well-being, because many of us have been away for almost 2 years in our own environment, and suddenly you would be in a crowd, and basically it's about how that person would be able to manage that in the crowd. Would they be able to address that when the anxiety comes on? Is very important. We have to remember that handshakes and high fives is definitely a thing of the past. So, but we all like to do a little wine and jam, isn't it? And get really close and comfy to each other. So we probably need to develop the Miami back wine, you know, where we back to back rather than forward. We have to recognize the personal vulnerabilities, what that look like. Personal vulnerabilities is essential. What do you have? What do you have going on in your life? That you have suffering from a comorbidity? Are you ill? Were you recently ill? All of those comorbidities and all those personal vulnerabilities is very much essential when you are going to enter into a place where there is a gathering of more than 100 or more. Also the accountability factor and the responsibility for others in your care. Normally in Carnival, you will see someone brought out someone in a wheelchair and have them on the sidewalk. And, you know, people go up to them and say, hi, how are you doing? And give them a hug. And that person is now in your care. Or even that person who actually came out, how did they get there? How would they leave? And how would they ensure that they are really protected? You know, it's all well and good we talking about only about COVID, but the fact is there are lots of other infectious diseases that is really prominent now. We have a cluster of pneumonia, and I know that Dr. Palmer probably touched on this. We have influenzas, we have measles cases. It's about that personal pledge within that environment. And I think it's about pushing out the message to your masqueraders that within the 48 hours prior to attending the festival, what are you ill with? What is your personal assessment at that time before actually coming to the event? And I know you want to come, you pay for your costume, but I think it's about that accountability at that point. I am not feeling well. Am I going to attend? And I know that people say, oh gosh, you know, I walk in with my hand sanitizers, but then the organizers have to think bigger than this. It's a bigger story, isn't it? The biggest story is, what is your boots agreement? What is the agreement that you're going to have with the boots? Are they going to hand sanitize the equipment? They're going to sanitize regularly. You're going to have professional cleaners go in and make sure that they do. So what is the waste and cleaning system that you have got to have in place? Are you going to have additional crew for that? Are they professionally trained? You're going to have hand washing stations, very much clear and visible. Are you going to have portable hand washing sinks as well, so that where the crowd move to more, you will have more of those? Are you going to control ticket sales, so that if tickets are being sold at an event and you realize the lines are growing and people having to stand rather close to each other, are you going to then be able to have enough volunteers to manage that? And the promoting of signage. So I think fundamentally, this can be a great carnival, a fantastic carnival, but it's about giving people very early in the day, promoting right across the board with all the people who are the masqueraders, organizers, DJs, and all of that, to develop a personal pledge. Let them develop their own pledge. Let them develop their own pledge. We are not, this is our pledge, that we don't want to restrict, but we are going to safeguard. There are a lot of people who are attending who don't believe in COVID. COVID never happened. And because their immunity has been fantastic. So I don't believe in it. And they've never been vaccinated. And it's about that, taking that personal pledge, whereby the personal pledge is not about me, but I am protecting you. And I think developing a personal pledge to work within this scenario, within this, is very important. And also, in all mass gatherings, I'm trained by the World Health Organization in mass gatherings, I think it's fundamental to have a group of people who are actually going to have specialists information in regards to exit, ambulance, how you're going to get someone out very quickly in the case of not only a respiratory, ABC, airway, circulatory, breathing, but how you are going to address that and make sure that they're safe. Because people are going to be looking at this carnival as a test, how well they manage it. Or because of the carnival, there's been a massive outbreak. And in order to minimize that reputational damage, I think it's fundamental that you go back to the basics about personal accountability and responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And you raised quite a few points there. I'd now like to come to Professor Rotimi. Thank you. And then I'm going to ask Vincent John to say a few words before we open up. You're on mute.
I'm used to muting myself. So I'll start again. I'm Rotimi Gayelle, an obstetrician and gynecologist. I've been a doctor for 44 years, worked in 3 continents, 6 countries. Currently, I'm Associate Medical Director for Patient Safety at Mid and South Essex Hospital. With the experience I have, I see myself as a global health expert, more interested in public health and prevention. You can only go to a carnival if you're in good health. And that's the message I want to try and cover in 10 minutes. When you listen to the news or you read items, you hear that there's a disproportionate amount of death in the Afro-Caribbean community. And that's multifactorial. Access, that is poor access, that we present late as well for various reasons. And then the discrimination that exists in society also does affect us. And the way I want to approach this, it's a big topic, but I'll try and cover it in 10 minutes. First and foremost is talking about men. The conditions that affect men commonly, and I'm just going to talk about men, is the prostate cancer. And it's important that we access screening services by doing our PSA levels. That's simple blood test that you could have done at the age of 40, or in some places it's the age of 45. Depending on that level, your GP will signpost you or keep you under surveillance if there's need for that. When we go over to women, I think the two common problems, breast cancer, and from the age of 50, you are invited to have your mammogram. It's like a scan. It's not invasive, and when I say it's not invasive, I say so from an operative point of view. Yes, it's an intimate examination, but it's not an invasive, painful procedure. So please avail yourself of the screening service when you are invited to. Cancer of the cervix, that is cancer of the neck of the womb, also kills a lot of people in the community. So from the age of 25 and every 3 years, you are invited to have your smear tests. There is a lot of apprehension in our society about medicine, medical, nursing interventions. These things are to prevent you from having disease. When you do get disease, it's more difficult to treat, it's more difficult to cure. So those are the 2 or 3 main issues that affect men and women. But what affects us, that is whether you're a man or a woman of ethnic background, includes things like hypertension. Very common in our community, leading to a lot of strokes and death. And again, checking your blood pressure is very important. The same with diabetes. If there's a family history of diabetes, it is important that you also avail yourself of screening or having your blood pressure monitored, either self-monitoring at home, or you go and see the nurse or the doctor in your GP practice. Obesity, I think we of African descent tend to think that when you're big and plump, that's a sign of wealth and affluence. No, it's not a sign of wealth or affluence. It's not a good thing to carry much weight around, because it affects the function of your heart and other things. Then one of the public health issues that we face as a community, and not just our own community, it's a global problem at the moment, is opioid abuse, that is drugs, recreational drugs. It's become a public health problem because people die from it, from overdosing. And yes, this is a carnival, and I'm sure the organizers go a long way to try and prevent people bringing drugs into the space. But nothing is always safe proof. So avoid drugs, because if you try it, you can become dependent on it. So the best thing is not to try at all. And one big topic that we now talk about is mental health. Again, you have to be mentally well to be able to attend a carnival. And again, we in the Afro-Caribbean community tend to look at mental illness as a stigma. It isn't a stigma, and there is care out of there. If you feel unwell, or if you have a relative that isn't fine, please seek treatment. I think it's Donald, or I can't remember whether it's Jennifer or Rudy. I think it's Rudy. You've spoken a lot about sleep, very, very important. 8 hours sleep, very good. I think whether you're young or old, when you sleep, it gives your body time to repair itself. Again, the diet we eat is very important, small portions. That doesn't mean you cannot take anything, but take them in moderation. Then diet and exercise are also very important. If you work in an office and a 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 job, take mini breaks, very, very important intervention to give you good health. And yes, age, will all age at some point in time. And again, it's to prepare our minds for that time. Getting old is not a problem. Loneliness definitely is not a good thing. Yes, that's another issue. Cultivate having friends. Cultivate having friends. Loneliness kills a lot of people in the community, and that's very important. And one other item I want to talk about in respect of the carnival. Yes, we want to have fun, but while having fun, make sure you protect yourself. Sexually transmitted infection is still out there. So don't let your guard down. And if you have to do anything after the carnival, make sure you wear condoms or protect yourself so that you do not get any infection. What I have tried to do is to talk about the various medical conditions that can affect our community from a health point of view. The buzzword at the moment is population health management, that is looking at the individual, their needs, and how to meet their needs. I will welcome many questions. Like I said, these are wide topics that you could talk about individually in a seminar, but that's just to give you a flavor of what we face as Afro-Caribbean community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and lots of key points which I'm sure we're going to dialogue on further. Right, Vincent John.
Hello, really good evening, everyone. I'm Vincent John. I'm currently the chairman of the Dominica UK Association, and we have a special project, cultural project called March Dominique, Nature Island Carnival Band. But also in 2011 to 2014, I chaired the Notting Hill Carnival, so which gave me quite an opportunity to actually observe during the route almost as a spectator. I also have members of the Association of Calypsonians and Circle Artists, some of whom perform on Carnival floats. I'm chairman of that organization, and a trustee director of the Carnival Arts Masquerade Foundation. So what I'm about to say is really based on the making Carnival safe, some perspectives from practical and pragmatic perspectives based on experience. One of the biggest issues about Carnival, and as alluded to by other colleagues on this panel, is that it attracts any and everyone. It's a very diversely attractive event, iconic event in Europe. So one of the ways to mitigate against the risks, which are almost inherent, but also man-made in Carnival, is to undertake a risk assessment. A risk assessment is fundamental if any person, both from a personal viewpoint and from a mass band viewpoint, wishes to make a major contribution towards safety. And so really, am I able to share anything at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm about to do, if it's possible, is to share my screen with you, just simply to give some indications of what is involved in undertaking the risk assessment. Can I just check that you see this clearly?
Yeah, we can see your columns.
Well, I've compiled, this is very detailed. I'll just skip through and mention the main headings. But a risk assessment based on walking the walk and walking the talk, being a carnivalist, being a mass band leader, and caring about everyone involved in the process. So in terms of preparing your risk assessment, a template has been created. We look at the major areas of risks, the hazards involved, look at the current measures in place, look at the, try to measure actually the impact of your arrangements against a sort of a statistical approach. And then think about further measures to actually control the risk or to actually reduce the exposure to the risk. And then the final risk rating based on your calculations. Now, I'll quickly go through some of the main headings and just mention a few the factors that could be taken into account, some actions you can actually take, practical actions. If you look at the costume design and production, an area which has produced quite a dynamic sort of atmosphere, sort of partnership and affection really between people who are involved in the process. But we are in a different environment now. So we have to think about taking all the various steps to mitigate against and to protect ourselves against contamination from virus. As has been alluded to previously, it's not only about COVID, it's any sort of transmittable virus. So things like arranging one-way systems. Yes, they've relaxed the rules about COVID, but don't think that you should allow any and everyone into your mass camp and doing any and everything. And think about how you can actually provide signs and provide information to your production unit, people who are involved in the production of your costumes and designing your costumes. Another key area is, when you're actually, forget about all this, such as the weather conditions, you've got combustion materials, you risk the risk due to fire and burns, injuries. I've seen situations where mass bands and masqueraders have a lovely time. All of a sudden, someone decides to use a rope and they've tied to the vehicle, and it's taking 10, 20 people with it, and lots of injuries from that. So really trying to take steps to avoid these sort of situations developing and causing injury to people. That's all part of the safety steps one has to take. Falling items, seen situations where a speaker falls off of a vehicle, injures not only masqueraders, but also members of the public. Obviously, there are issues about insurance and suit. So we have to be very, very careful. Things like preparing for your float, making sure that it's safe is very important. Electrical shocks takes place, collisions, serious injuries, and hopefully no death, but these things are there as risks. Crushing, and entanglement of masqueraders, those issues have got to be taken into account. And the big different, the COVID-19, but also all the viruses. It was mentioned earlier about making sure that we have arrangements for water, washing hands, signs to inform our masqueraders what they should be doing. And also it's important not only to depend on your masqueraders taking action, but having your own stewards, encouraging them to actually do so. That's quite important. Another area which I find needs a lot of attention is that when we're all together, it was mentioned earlier about pre-existing medical conditions. Now, we need to address those, and particularly now with the viruses, I think even after everything's been relaxed and we think we're all safe. It was mentioned earlier about making sure you have your own personal health check. That's very, very important. And sometimes we have a situation where those coming to Carnival are very enthusiastic, but haven't actually brought their medication. And one of the things we do on a mass bus traveling to the Carnival is to prepare a documentation. And we also ask people that is there anyone, we approach each masquerader individually and ask them about their medication and everything else. We also make sure we provide first aiders and people who know about infection, people who know about broken limbs, etc., to be there and to assist the masqueraders. Not only on arrival and during the actual events, but also afterwards, because sometimes people do get very merry and their sense of direction is actually reduced markedly. I mentioned about injuries as a result of public disturbances. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, we had a situation where it was at the time when the spilling of liquids on people was very, very regular. And someone mentioned that so this guy's got acid and they threw a bottle which contained water, but everyone just panicked. And that was a sort of a disturbance. So one of the things we try to do is to make sure, in spite of acid being in the background, we ensure that we provide lots of water. And CAMF has produced a guidelines, that's the Carnival Masquerade Foundation, produced guidelines for making sure we have sufficient water in case of this spillage of acid, which could affect our masqueraders and the public. Some mass bands have very large costumes, and we have to think about protection of not only the masqueraders who are part of the band, but also members of the public. And someone mentioned earlier about sometimes members of the public just enter the band. That is a high risk issue. One of the things we've done is to hire extra stewards of security to assist our masqueraders because they are at risk of being injured. There's this biological hazards and particularly food poisoning. Taking care about who you select to provide your catering, make sure they're certificated and qualified people, and making sure that you containers that you use are clean, making sure that you have people assigned to the task of ensuring that your masqueraders have a safe meals throughout the process. Sometimes we have members of the public who try to get the children into the band, or even masqueraders themselves. So we have to think about safeguarding of our children. And one of the issues which I have personally seen, particularly when traveling around the carnival route, is where sexual behavior takes place, which is inappropriate. So that's another thing we have to be careful about, and we actually instruct our masqueraders not to engage in any such activity throughout the masquerade, the parade.
I can give you another minute.
Just about to wrap up to say that I'm very supportive of individual personal risk assessments, making sure that we communicate continuously throughout the actual process from beginning to end. And I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Vincent. Right, and just before we open it up for everybody to have their say, and there's been some suggestions, all bands to be legally obligated to have provisions for disabled persons or limited mobility to ensure inclusivity. The council and carnival committees to introduce no-cost spared safe zone for masqueraders and spectators, such as paid entry, seated stands, or closed-off area for masqueraders. Also, other revelers who do not wish to see the masquerade can use the outskirts to navigate towards their chosen sound system. So we just raise that. If you're able to take your presentation down, Vincent, that would be helpful.
I'm trying to, yes.
And we will carry on. Right. We're now going to open up the discussion, dialogue. Right. And Ansel, is there any points of view that you want to set forth?
I know that there was an issue around providing and making provisions safety for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
I don't know if Juliet is on here yet, because Juliet might be able to take us through from her experiences. Juliet Braid, are you on?
Doesn't.
No. Okay. All right. So that was an issue that we committed to, and I think there are other people
right
who have experience.
Marcia Walker has got a hand up.
Thanks. Yes, for a number of years now. I'm from Northampton, by the way. We've been working with groups with various disabilities, including wheelchair and partially sighted. We've been able to have volunteers as well, and we've created drop-off points on the route in case they experience any difficulties. We've had one or two where there have been schools that have had a float as opposed to a big troop, and managed to get vehicles that have got lifts, yes, and bars that secure them. We even take it to the point of where we have workshops just to make sure those are accessible and that people can come and feel comfortable with the spacing and rooms that they have. It's just caught me off guard because I had some notes about it, but I've just come from a funeral wake, so I'm in another world. But in Northampton, we do work with 2 or 3 groups that have got disability, and that's gone on for a good 3 years, and we are managing it. Our events plan also has mention of it as our risk assessment, which we have that done by someone who understands carnival, and we do what the last speaker said, go for that walk around and make sure things are safe.
Okay, thank you for that. So, Ansel, what about some of the other points relating to, right, before I let Michaeline come in.
Okay, hi. I think I just want to suggest that under mass gatherings is really important, despite whatever risk assessment is in place, that we look at the 10 measures that really work effectively. And that one, the most acute of those is the risk assessment, which is great, but having the considerations of the mitigations and who will mitigate that is fundamental. Despite increased hygiene standards and hand washing, is about the availability of hand sanitizers and making sure they're readily available if people cannot get access to running water. It's about promoting that education, the number of persons on site, identifying high-risk people quickly, looking at where location is and what particular location that you're gonna have really, you will have more or less have a bottleneck and how you're gonna manage that. But fundamentally, I think it's really important for all mass gatherings for you to consider passports. People hate the word passport, so you can use any other word, packages, agreements, whatever it is, but it's something that you agree with the masquerading organization, the masqueraders. They all have a little handbook that says, this is the do's and don'ts, visitors information, agreements that you're going to have with booths and people who are selling all these whistles and all of that. What is the agreement that you're going to have with them? And then you come down to which is called the basic management, which is the ambulances, first aid and all of that. But very important is to have mini agreements. I like to call it mini agreements. So you know it's an agreement between us and you, and how you're going to uphold your agreement so that if something happened, you cannot say you weren't aware. And I think that's where, you know, you remove the issue of just having verbal dialogue to something that is agreed. When you sign up, you pay your money that you're going to have your ban, but this is the agreement that we're going to have in place. And I think having these mini agreements, mini passports, mini packages where people have to be accountable and deliver against those, it really makes it very much a safe mass gathering. And I just want to reiterate that because it's really important. As the immunology expert, Dr. Palmer, said in his very early in the day, it is about understanding that, you know, your immune system may not be for you, but for many others can really be, you know, we've got to think not of I, but of others. And I just really think it's really important of that message. Thank you. I've got nothing more to say.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Tola, and then we come to Giselle.
Hi, I just wanted to say that although I agree with everything that's been said, a lot of the issues that we're discussing aren't necessarily just in the gift of the carnival organisations or the carnivalists. I mean, I've been to Notting Hill and I've seen those really horrible toilets where there's not even anywhere to wash your hands. So I think it's really actually looking at the whole shape of the carnival, about the route, about how it's managed by the police and by the local authority, not just Notting Hill, but all of the carnivals, to make sure that there is enough room for people to actually distance themselves, so that if people want to spread out, that they're able to. I think although it's lovely to be in that crowd and to really enjoy all the dancing and everything, sometimes there really isn't very much choice, because people are being kettled and directed along sort of like routes that aren't big enough really to take in all of the people that are there. So I really think that this needs to be not just a dialogue with the carnival community, but dialogue with the local authorities and with the police as well, to make sure that everybody understands that changes need to happen to make carnival safe. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for that. We'll just take Giselle's point, then maybe come back to you, Ansel, if there's anything that you may want to raise against the points that Tola's made. So Giselle?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, good evening.
Okay, thank you for inviting me to this chat. For everyone who probably doesn't know me, I have two mass bands, a children's band and an adult band that participates in Notting Hill Carnival. I agree with what has been said so far by everyone, but one of the things that I want to touch on is that when we talk about having that sort of agreement, like Michaeline said, that sort of social contract, we need to look at it from three aspects: the masquerader, the organizer, and the spectator. And it has to be triangulated in that way so that everyone is aware of what the expectation is. The point that Tola made about the route not being big enough is a very important one, because people are herded along. And if we look at the history of Carnival and the fact that the route in itself has been shrunk significantly from what it used to be, and the numbers of people participating in Carnival as either spectator, masquerader, or the other has grown, you can clearly see that the math doesn't work. And therefore that needs to be urgently looked at. And that also has an impact in terms of public health and safety, in terms of the toilet. The fact that she raised about the toilets is a really real one, and I think that Carnival has been under-resourced in terms of, the infrastructure that is put along the parade route for masqueraders and spectators and the like. And that is another issue that needs to be addressed. From a band leader perspective, one of the things that we need to consider is that a lot of these issues that we're talking about comes at a cost. And no one has mentioned the financial implications of this. As a band leader, it is extremely costly to bring out a masquerade on the road, especially if you don't have any sort of grant or any sort of funding and you're pocketing it, you're funding it from your own pockets. Costume production is expensive. The price of raw materials have gone up, and people are very price sensitive when it comes to playing mass in Notting Hill Carnival, because there is still this, sort of idea amongst a lot of people that is something that should be cheap. And why should they pay for a costume or pay for an experience when they can have pretty much, in their eyes, the same experience by a static sound system or the other? And therefore, for band leaders to take extra measures, to put extra measures in place, whether it be extra security, extra hand washing facilities, even alcohol gel, if that is not coming through the route of a sponsor, and you're having to fork out the money for alcohol gel, that's going to be costly. And at the end of the day, a lot of band leaders I know, and myself included, if we don't get grants, we make a loss. And how much of a loss are you willing to take? A lot of us, we continue to do Carnival, we continue to put masquerade on the road because we are passionate about it. It is our culture, it's something that we love. But in order for us to move forward, we need to look at the bigger picture in terms of the financial implications. Right. And if it is that we want everyone to be safe, we need to think about that. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Ansel?
I just wanted a slight change in looking in a much more strategic way at the notion of carnival, and particularly our carnivals, which is a sort of Caribbean, Trinidad focused carnival throughout the United Kingdom, different from the carnivals that they have in other cities of the UK, and its relationship to this society, in the way in which carnival is perceived, the festival is perceived, and how our links with whatever is happening within the society. And at every point of the development of carnival, we've had to bang our heads against the way in which the state, the government, the local authority interprets our festival. So its relationship to the notion of terrorism, for example, was a key feature. Remember those days when we had the lone wolf terrorists, the lorries that were going into the crowds? As a result of that, the impact on the safety of carnival was an imposition of elements of a portfolio or of a protocol that include massive barriers that prevented you entering and going out of the carnival and timetabling you in terms of your participation. Vincent referred to the issues around acid and the impact of that on crowd control, because to the extent to which we have to manage a crowd in a very, very narrow space and in a route that goes down and becomes clustered. So the management of that space by the DJ, by the stewarding and so on is a key feature. And most importantly, I think for us, is the extent to which we always have to respond to the imposition of conditions imposed outside by the regulatory authorities or by the strategic partners or by the mayor's office or by the police. And the safety is sometimes compromised by the overriding concerns of these external bodies, as opposed to us as carnivalists and band leaders and people who enjoy the art and culture of the Caribbean. And there are a lot of details in terms of how that impacts on the safety of carnival. And I think it's going to be a long, long process of negotiation, renegotiation, and also the extent to which we can get change without getting to the situation where they see it's impossible and the only solution is to ban the carnival or to take it to a park.
Thank you. Vincent, I'd be interested in your perspective on some of those points that have been raised.
I mean, I totally agree with the perspective outlined by Ansel there. Can I just give you a very quick example? As early as 2019, the last carnival, my band was more or less dissected in several sections by a massive crowd of people that the police allowed. They separated my support vehicle, which had some disabled persons on it, from the actual stewards, from the main vehicle itself, the masqueraders and the supporters. So we were more or less static for an hour, trying to get back into some sort of semblance of order. So really, I think crowd management is a major issue. We can make all provisions, risk assessments for, avoiding contaminations, etc., from any virus. But one of the biggest issues we have to face is people's perception of the carnival, because that has major implications for our funding. And Gayelle mentioned funding. My band has never received a penny from the Arts Council in 25 years. So we have to meet the cost ourselves. But one other thing to emphasize from a band perspective is that there needs to be a higher priority given to the safety of the bands and members of their bands, the masqueraders. The police, I think, and even from my time when I was chairman of the carnival, they look at the whole situation from a public safety perspective and give too much priority to the crowd and too little to the masqueraders. And that's an issue, a major problem.
Vincent, could I just make a point and invite Kamala Wisdom to probably talk to us, because one of the issues we face in Carnival is the extent to which there's again a perception of it being a platform for social disorder and criminality, and therefore the attempt to arrest people before the Carnival, have knife challenges and so on. And I know Kamala has been doing a lot of work with knife crime and victims and so on. And I wonder if she wants to share some of her thoughts of that with us. Yeah. Kamala, I'm seeing you're on. Okay. Probably not. Okay.
Ansel, could I make a comment, please, if that was okay? It's me, Donald.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I'm, as I say, I go to Carnival, but it's really been interesting because I don't know the ins and outs. But I just want to make a couple of suggestions, just as someone in the community, and see how this applies. And I think it was Tola and others who mentioned this. Carnival will be, if it is by the numbers, will be one of the largest events, since the pandemic. So I wonder, in terms of crowd control and things like that, I wonder if there's any lessons we can learn from, say, football matches, which are currently undergoing where there's large crowds. How have they managed that? Premiership matches have been going now. There's going to be this coming Sunday, Liverpool and Chelsea will be playing at Wembley. So there's going to be a large number of crowds there. I wonder if there's any way we can find out how they manage the crowd in that example. But then the other point is, and something Tola and others mentioned about hygiene and the toilets, I wonder if this actually provides folks like you and others with the opportunity to make certain demands. And I was reading something, I think Rudy and others may have commented that despite the issues of COVID and the inequalities, this is also gives the community the opportunity now to make some demands, to require change. Because in a sense, we can't no longer go back to pre-COVID days. Mm-hmm. So is it a case that we want to have better toilets now and certain stations for hygiene? Maybe it is a time now to say, well, actually, it's no longer permissible to use the current space. It has to be larger. I don't know, maybe I'm just being naive, but I just wondered if this now is an opportunity to demand what we really want.
Well, in terms of Notting Hill Carnival, as opposed to the other carnivals in the UK, it has a particularly unique characteristic. It's an unregulated event, which means that say a lot of the other carnivals, say in Birmingham and Bristol and so on, you get the approval of the local authority to stage the event. Notting Hill is unregulated. It's the only unregulated event in the whole of the United Kingdom, which means to say that nobody is legally responsible for the event. There have been attempts to change that, but we have already resisted that, because when that happens, like a football match, we will then have to pay for the police. We will have to pay for the St. John's ambulance. Yeah. We'll have to pay for everything. So currently it's in our interest not to have Carnival change from its present constitutional position. And I think that's a key factor that also impacts on some of the risks that we have and experience, because somebody has to pay for the police, and that's millions of pounds. Somebody has to pay for the cleaning up after the carnival. That's also thousands of pounds, and we have not got the money for that.
I'd like to come to Rotimi.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to all speakers. Very informative and interesting. I'm just trying to be futuristic. I recognize the financial constraints that we have, but how can we use technology to overcome some of this bottleneck? And when I say technology, I'm thinking of stimulation of the venue, process mapping, stuff like that. Perhaps getting technology companies to support us and use their expertise in preparing for the carnival. I think going forward, in years to come, or even this time around, one can explore things like that, where you know who is coming, you know how many floats are coming. You cannot predict how many people will be there, but from past experience, one can do that. You know the space, you know the area, and then get information people to do some process mapping and stimulation. I think, where would you locate hand sanitizers? How many toilets do we need and stuff like that? So thank you.
Thank you for that. And that's some good point in terms of starting to present that kind of data ahead of the event, which of course would strengthen the argument that you made earlier on. And so of course we are where we are, the world has changed, and there's some reality in terms of personal and community responsibility, all that, you know, public security, public confidence, the media, all of these things, as you say shape the perception of whether activities, public activities, are safe, and of course where that cost burden is shared as well. So yeah. So back to you, Ansel.
There are a number of issues and detailed issues that one can look at. And I think there's an expectation that because Carnival has not happened for 2 years, come the summer of 2022, whether it's Northampton or whether it's Leicester or London or Bristol, there will be an increase in the number of participants. On the other hand, I am hearing other people saying there'll be less people because most people will find it very risky to want to participate in Carnival. And I think we have to manage that, because that participation can impact on crowd density, on the management of crowd. That participation may also affect how people behave. And if there's a heightened sense of joy and participation, what does that mean? Increased alcohol, increased risks, whatever it is. So I think all of us, the organizations of Carnival, the strategic authorities, the police, and everybody, have to begin to work towards a kind of understanding of what is likely to happen and plan for what will happen in the summer of 2022, and how we manage that, because the safety of everybody is important. Notting Hill, for example, you would know it is never advertised, the Carnival. You would never see an ad saying, come to the Carnival.
Yeah.
That is something that has been ingrained for the last 15 years, certainly when I was chair, where it was made very explicit by the authorities that we couldn't put out any marketing material to encourage people to attend, because the amount of people attending was already a concern. So that is something we need to look at. The kind of people who also attend these events, and the kind of protocol, because Carnival has, Carnival as I know it in Trinidad, has a certain protocol, a certain etiquette in terms of how you behave and what you do. And it will take a number of years for that etiquette and protocol to be transferred and to be embraced and to be accepted in the United Kingdom. Classic example, with a Carnival band and its parading configuration, you do not enter that band. You can't cross across that band. That is de rigueur. That is an accepted practice. And anybody who do that will tend to get a very robust response from stewards and so on. That doesn't happen in the UK. It will take a while for people to understand and for audiences to understand that that's the etiquette of Carnival, and you then parade and you go along. But people want to come and take selfies. They want to come and jump up with a young woman that they see in the band, or they want to come and beg for a drink. And that causes problem, that causes conflict, because there is a breach of protocol, there's a breach of etiquette. And that will take time for those elements to be introduced that would make it safe for the parade. At the end of every band, you have hundreds of people who jump on behind a band to enjoy themselves. There is no way we have of controlling those hundreds of people behind a sound system. And you can't do that, because along the route, there are not always barriers. They can't have barriers on all the carnivals, except where there are carnivals like in Nottingham, where you can have it at a park and you can control entry and exit.
Thanks for that. Jennifer, then we come to you, Marcia.
Thank you, Rudy. It's absolutely fascinating listening to the discussion. I wasn't aware, like my colleague, Dr. Donald Palmer, of the intricacies. The one thing I just wanted to mention, I know that you have said that the Notting Hill Carnival is unregulated. However, I wonder whether or not public health might be able to support with freebies like sanitizers, and whether or not you actually have any co-production, any dialogue with public health, because you've got a great advocate there in the Caribbean community, Professor Kevin Fenton, and I don't know whether or not there is any sort of collaboration with public health, because this, if there is a massive outbreak, then it does become a public health concern, and then we have all of the issues around hospitalization, etc. So those were just my thoughts.
I think that's something to be explored, Jennifer, certainly. I mean, the main contribution of public health in the past was just the free condoms that we got.
Yeah, I think their attitude will be slightly different now in this pandemic era. So we can certainly assist with helping to.
I think so too.
Do something about that.
Thank you.
Thanks for that great point. Marcia?
Yeah, it was interesting, Ansel opened up with about, will we have more people or less? Yes. And Jennifer's just raised health issues, and I came in where the speaker was talking about all sorts of health issues. And I would think attendance by some people, attending as people watching, but also participating, is going to be reliant, I think, as to how we present that safety aspect, especially for people who may have underlying health issues themselves. Yes, I can think of various troops that will have people who've got underlying health issues. And really, I suppose it's up to the organizers to start trying to market it in such a way that those people feel safe, that they're coming into an environment that's taken into account issues around health, although they're parading. Because it was a really good point. Yes, whether we're going to get lots more people coming or a lot less. And so for participants, as well as those watching, I think carnivals need to really be looking at how things are being presented so that people can feel fairly confident that if they come and join in with us, it's all the issues, Jennifer, you raised, what happens if there's an outbreak of something, they can always find Black people, something goes wrong, they can trace it back, pinpoint it to the nearest yard on that journey. But we've got to, in a way, it's hard, I'm not saying it's easy, find a way to make sure that we've got things in place and that in a way we're promoting that.
Yeah. So Ansel, we seem to be at a point of, have the management of the groups, the carnival, reached a consensus in terms of the approach and the plan when it comes to these health and safety, and where the responsibility lies in terms of personal and organizational, and where it might be elsewhere? Is there a kind of has a consensus been reached?
I don't know if we have a consensus, but I do know that each carnival and each regional area has addressed most of these issues, if not all of these issues. And as Vincent has already indicated, risk assessments is very key to participation. And so most carnivals have protocols in terms of performance or performance criteria that you need to comply with in order to participate. And there are some considerations. And we need to also look at some of the impact of the things that have been raised here in relation to implementing those protocols, like costs and changes in things. For example, I think, please, I stand corrected, but I know in either 2 or 3 years' time, we have to get rid of the diesel generators and diesel lorries. So all have to go electric from COP26. So that has going to be an impact on Carnival immediately in terms of its viability, if that has to happen. Also, it's better for people in terms of their health because of the reduction in the carbon footprint. But I think all of those issues are constantly being discussed. And every year you review what happened in the previous year and you prepare a plan, an event plan that take that on board. And as others has said, one of the uniqueness of this year is that the footprint, as well as the ways in which we access certain elements of the carnival, has resulted in a phenomenal increase in costs, which would then reduce what each individual carnival band can do to increase the well-being and the health. Classic example, we use stewards as route marshals or security. And if you are a SDH trained steward, whereas you can be paying 45 pounds last time for the day, it's now more than 90 pounds that the organization are asking. So our bill has gone all through the roof if you appoint experienced security people. The materials we are buying from China, one, it is not always available because of the supply lines that have been affected. And the cost has increased by more than 15 times in terms of some areas. So bands may well find a difficulty in trying to cope with that in this particular year. And that may well impact on density of population, of crowds and other aspects. But I think every year is a crucial year where we try to learn from our mistakes, trying to learn from our experiences, and try to plan. And at the core of it is to have a safe and enjoyable carnival.
Thanks for that. Before I come to you, Vincent, there's a comment in the chat about again this collective approach, and that's somebody from Luton was saying that they would support it, because it does sound as though that in order to gain public support, agreement within the carnival system itself, the managers and the participants, and then go for public support, which would mean a lot more public understanding about, you know, the issues that you face as well. I think that's going to be important. Vincent.
Yeah, so actually what I'm about to say is both related to what Claudette has posted there, as well as what Ansel said. And we've got to look at this, as we've mentioned before, personal responsibility, the band's responsibility. There is this general duty of care.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to approach this from the duty of care and public health dimension. And importantly, the carnival organizers have got to review the infrastructure from the perspective of including infection control or a COVID-safe or infection-safe environment as part of the infrastructure. And I think if that can be done on behalf of all participants, members of the public, as well as the masqueraders and bands, that would be very helpful. But it does require collusion. It requires everyone agreeing on that basis. And I think based on the support of all the bands, the various arenas, static sounds, etc., I think it's a good idea if the organizers took that on board very, very quickly and approach large corporates as well as the health service to try to assist us on that basis.
Yeah, and I think the point was made earlier on about inclusion as it related to disability, but also about the safe zones. So that the whole your point, the reality is that the infrastructure for the management of Carnival has changed. There's obligations, personal, structural, that are now a reality. It obviously will take another number of meetings for that consensus to be reached, but you've built in the infection control, the inclusion, the safeguarding, those elements, and maybe some of those things that we didn't look at pre-2019 kind of thing, because the world has changed. There's a reality of that. So back to you, Ansel.
Just saying that I think we need to balance that in a sense with a critical evaluation of how any of those changes impact on the nature of the event. Carnival is a spontaneous expression of creativity and joy and performance. And whilst I understand the need in terms of the duty of care and health and safety and other issues, I think when we look at all of those issues, does that change the essence of the carnival? Does that change what carnival is, what the art is? And more discussions, I think, with artists and participants needs to happen when we begin to ask for change, those sort of change. So I don't want change for the sake of change as a response to a pandemic or as a response to an issue. I would prefer and have an opportunity for all of us to begin to explore if that will impact on the very nature of the event.
Yeah, absolutely. Marcia, because there's a reality that you're facing there.
But my thing is, the arts is always a cheater, and people in the artistic world know how to cheat. They know how to make something work in a creative way. So that's why you're all, those of you are designers and all the rest of it, that's how you get away with things. So I agree with Ansel, it's trying not to spoil it, but I think there's some, I'm looking at names here, really creative people around who can have both the safety and still keep that image, you know, of what carnival is really about. And it's called cheating.
And you'll be buying British because the supply chain collaboration is an issue for the economy as a whole. So buy local.
Yeah. So yeah, so I agree that you can put so much in place, it spoils it. But I think then the issue is you come back to seeing ways of doing it and thinking outside of the box.
Yeah. Okay. And so we're coming down to the last 5 minutes or so. Are there any key points that you want to raise maybe for discussion at a later point? Just a roundup of today as well.
I think one of the questions you posed earlier from somebody who's put it in the chat was the issues around people who non-costume wearers, I think, be posing a major risk to the carnival. And I think that's obviously a concern, because if we also committed to engaging and being diverse in encouraging participation and being inclusive, we should welcome participation at any level. But again, participation in the carnival at any level has risks for us and for the parade, because the public can't just jump into a band and enjoy themselves and enjoy the music. And I think carnival, again, one of the essences of carnival, as opposed to the theater, for example, is one of those only festivals where you have to pay for your costume in order to participate. In other things in the theater, you become an actor or an actress and they pay you to wear their costume to perform. Is the exact opposite to carnival. So that's an issue, that's one of the uniqueness of the festival that I think is important. And I think it's also important for much more community organizations and carnivalists and members of the public to engage in a dialogue like this, to continue to inform the planners, continue to inform carnival committees and the governors of carnival to take on board. So these assemblies, what I call carnival assemblies, should really happen more and more, so that the voices of all of us are helping to influence the planning. I know we, to a certain extent, Notting Hill Carnival is trying to do that by having various assemblies for engaging with the residents and also the communities. And the unique thing that we have in Notting Hill is we have carnival arenas around each of the major genres of the art form. And there are 5 of them, and it's important that they also be engaged in part of that planning. So it's important for participation for everybody, all of us, to put our views and to help to influence the final outcome. And I'm sure, as you, Rudy, you may well be willing to continue to host these kind of dialogues if we think it's necessary.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in doing that. I think it's important because Carnival is an important part of the creative economy of this country, London in particular, all the skills and all of the infrastructure that supports that. And then, as was mentioned in the chat, it's a great opportunity for young people and, you know, up and coming bands and organizations to be mentored. They could be, you know, set up by the, so it's an important part of the culture, creative and cultural industries. You know, it's, you know, it's and it's an integral part of Caribbean culture in this country as well. So I think greater public understanding of the issues, and as I say, the industry itself reaching a consensus so that it can, you know, put its case forward to the public and get community support, because the support is there. Because all of us who of a certain age understand the foundations of the carnival and why it came to being in the first place.
And I think the important last message is that the future of the carnival is not assured. The future of the carnival is only assured when we engage with our young people, when we engage with our children and grandchildren, so that they feel part and parcel of a carnival and they have the ownership. Because if we don't control and own the carnival and hand it over to regulatory authorities and so on, it will not be our festival. It will never be our festival. And what will be handing over to our young people, or second and third generations, in terms of their engagement in the carnival? We have to do that because it's their carnival, and they will change it. Yeah. And they will change it in ways in which we, my generation, might not like or would not like. And I think we have to accept all of that. So it's not just safety and well-being, but it's future, so that the event continues to exist. And I think all dinosaurs like myself have to accept that there will be change, and some of that change we will not like. But my children and my grandchildren are already beginning to express things that I find there's no way I can think that should happen in Carnival, but they are in a majority. And I have accepted that I've been pushed in a direction to which I don't necessarily want to follow. But let's continue to discuss and talk.
Right, and on that inspiring note, I'll say good evening to all and thank you very much, and look forward to part 2 very soon. Good night all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah, good night. Brilliant discussion.
Lovely, thank you.
Good night.